What's up, everyone? It's Dakota, and welcome back to another Magic the Gathering video. And today, we're going to be talking about the Living End deck for the Modern format. This is a deck that has stood the test of time in Modern for a while there are some eras that we can kind of look back and see where Living End was definitely a lot more popular than it was at other times. It seems to currently be on an upswing and performing very well, this list in particular, making the top 8 of a Modern 32 challenge and just kind of popping up throughout challenges in the top 32, putting up some pretty good results, and of course, posting some 5-0s on Magic Online. This is a deck that for a lot of deck, like this is definitely like a game one deck where you're just looking to kind of do your thing and then try to steal one of the sideboard games, because it's very hard for your opponents to, in general, kind of interact with your game plan when you're kind of as disruptive as this Living End deck is. And if you've kind of played, older versions of Modern, you know that this version of Living End is a lot more interactive in a lot of key places than we had previously seen other Living End decks. So obviously, with the banning of Violent Outburst some time ago, this deck has gotten worse because of how the card Living End actually works, which of course we're going to go over in this video. So definitely kind of keep that in mind when we kind of talk about this deck, because it kind of returning is really crazy considering the fact that like Rhinos is like a far better deck, or at least far more consistent in terms of being able to play through some different sideboard hate and the different things that you'd play against these Cascade decks. And Living End's the deck that's actually kind of coming back into the fold, where Rhinos is just kind of like bordering on like meme status. But before we get too deep into the video and we talk about Living End today, if you're already subscribed to the channel and you want to see more videos from me where we talk mainly about the Modern standard formats as well as some other longer form content for your viewing pleasure, so if that's something that interests you, please consider subscribing and ring that notification bell so you know when those videos get posted. It's a very easy way to support me and my content. And if you want even more content, go ahead and check out the description down below. I got a link to my Twitch channel, my Discord server, my podcast, the Casual Spikes podcast, where hopefully we'll be able to record some episodes here soon, just with some work schedules and some crazy things going on. It's been kind of difficult lately, but we do appreciate everybody going ahead and checking out that channel nonetheless. Lastly, I want to thank the sponsor of the channel, Manatraders. If you use my code in the description down below, you can get 5% off your monthly subscription. You're probably asking, what the heck is Manatraders to begin with? Well, Manatraders is a subscription service to where you can rent cards for Magic the Gathering Online and play whatever decks you want whenever you want. You essentially get like a limit. You can rent so many cards, and then you are able to rent cards such as, some of the things for Living End, which we'll have a link in the description down below as well, that you can essentially go and rent from them, and that stops you from, spending all the money to acquire the cards, and then you decide maybe you don't like the deck and you want to try to sell it, whatever. All the hassle of it is completely gone. You just use their service. You just rent and play whatever decks you want whenever you please. It's an awesome tool. I use it a lot for playtesting when I'm not using it for like content creating and streaming and stuff like that. And like I said, if you use my code in the description down below, you get 5% off your monthly subscription, and I also get a little bit of a kickback to kind of support the channel as well. So it's a win-win for everybody. So go ahead and check them out if you're interested in getting started on Magic the Gathering Online. Like I said, you don't want to invest necessarily into one specific deck. You just kind of want to play around with a bunch of things and figure out what you like. They're definitely great for that, on top of all the different incentives and stuff like that you get for subscribing longer. So that's pretty cool. But with all that said, let's go ahead and check out this Living End deck. So we kind of talk about Rhinos, and I think Rhinos is like the more popular Cascade deck that a lot of players recognize, but Living End is kind of like an OG of like the Cascade kind of archetype, where Living End is this kind of weird sorcery, of course, kind of like how Rhinos is, where Crashing Footfalls doesn't have a cost. Technically, Living End does not have as an undefined cost, but you can suspend it for 2 and a black. In this deck, you are definitely not doing that. It is so bad for you to set up a Living End like this. But for each player, so each player exiles all creature cards from their graveyards and then sacrifices all creatures they control. Then puts all creatures exiled this way onto the battlefield. So essentially, whatever's on the battlefield ends up getting sacrificed, and then whatever was in the graveyard before all this stuff happened ends up coming back onto the battlefield. And a way that you kind of break the symmetry of this is that you play a lot of creatures that either like sacrifice themselves when they come into play, or you just have these cards that have like the cycling ability, which we see on cards like Curator of Mysteries, where it's a 4-mana 4/4 flying. Whenever you cycle or discard a card, you scry 1. That's pretty cool. But it cycles for a single blue mana, so you're able to put it in your graveyard, discard the card, draw a card. This is going to kind of help you with some consistency issues that you could potentially have with this deck. You're playing 15 lands and 2 MDFCs, so you're really leaning heavily on a lot of these cycling cards where you're keeping 1 to 2 land hands. Maybe you have like a Cascader, which we'll kind of get into the Cascaders here in a minute, but Ideally, with having just a bunch of these like cycling cards, you're able to keep hands that are like 1 or 2 lands, or like maybe a few lands and a bunch of cyclers, and you're just missing like the cascade piece. You're able to kind of go through your deck and actually get to a point where, you know, you're just going to kind of naturally solve those problems by just discarding a bunch of these cards and drawing these cards. So, you know, we have things like Curator, Mysteries. We talked about creatures that kind of sacrifice themselves. We see Subtlety here at 4 copies and Endurance here. You know, you can evoke them for, you know, exiling a green card or a blue card. You get a little bit of disruption. Endurance in particular being pretty powerful because you could just get rid of your opponent's graveyard. And if they're able to like sacrifice their own creatures and stuff to potentially mess with your living end, you're able to Endurance their graveyard away and then even get that Endurance back on top of any of the other creatures that are in your graveyard. Subtlety as well also just counters a Planeswalker or a creature spell. This allows you to interact, especially with 3 mana Teferi. Even though it's not super popular, it's around enough to where, you know, having Subtlety is kind of a very nice option. You're also playing for Force Negation here to kind of help you play against some of the like just disruptive elements that your opponent can play, since we're not really playing Violent Outburst anymore because it's banned. And that Force Negation was really good in trying to protect that part of the combo. But, you know, cards like Subtlety, Force Negation, very powerful, as they're going to help get annoying creatures that are going to stop your game plan off the battlefield or keep them off the battlefield, while also setting you up to have a very good living end. Plus a 3/3 flyer is really a good way of like closing out the game. We see cards like Street Wraith that are going to cycle for no mana. You can just pay 2 life, put it into your graveyard. 3/4 Solid Block is also a decent sized creature. And kind of what we missed out on here is like Generous End. So we were talking about potentially just keeping hands that are, you know, very land light. Maybe you have like 1 or 2 lands. Having a Generous End at forest cycles instead of just cycling to, you know, draw a card. So this is a way that you could also just hit land drops. You'll be able to look for a forest card to be able to put in your hand, which means that you could go and get some of these like Surveil lands. Like, you know, you can go get a Temple Garden or whatever, but you could also get something like a Hedge Maze, which or Lush Portico if you need to, just to have a little bit more deck manipulation. Potentially put creatures into the graveyard. Look for maybe some type of counter spell or things of that nature to just kind of, again, keep your game plan going forward. Kind of some interesting ones here as well at the top end here is like Colossal Sky Turtle as a 1/of. You know, this is a 7 mana 6/5 Flying Ward 2. Pretty powerful, but for 7 mana, not really ideal. But it also has Channel, which is another way that we can get creature cards, this creature into our graveyard. We can pay 2 and a green, and we can discard it to return target card from our graveyard to our hand. It allows us to pick up another Cascader, potentially a Shardless Agent or Ardent Plea as our Cascaders. If maybe they end up getting milled or they get destroyed, whatever the case may be, we essentially have access to another Cascader if possible. Also, could just do the same thing with like picking up a lot of these like Subtlety or Endurance, again, to kind of mess with our opponent's graveyard. Even just picking up a Cycler to get rid of it, picking up a Counterspell, whatever the case may be. This is just essentially gives us extra copies of those cards in our deck. We can also pay 1 and a blue and then discard it to return target creature to its owner's hand. Sometimes you just need just that much more time. You don't want to necessarily put that creature into your opponent's graveyard. You're able to just kind of bounce it and then set up for a potential turn where you can living end, and, you know, your opponent's creature basically isn't going to matter at that point. But, you know, a lot of the time, this card ends up putting in a lot of work because it is going to kind of accomplish both of those things very well, and it's just a 1/of, so you're not necessarily worried about drawing multiples of these and not being able to have enough mana to actually get them out of your hand to kind of do things. You just have just enough to where, you know, you can do the thing and then bringing it back, and it's just a really hard flyer to end up beating. There's also Waker Waves, which is also a really good, nice creature to get back. 7 mana, 7/7. You can pay 1 and a blue and discard it. You look at the top 2 cards, you put 1 in your hand, the other one in your graveyard, potentially able to put 2 creatures in your graveyard while also digging for that Cascader and or land, and it gives creatures your opponent's control -1, -0. That's a very annoying ability, and for a lot of people that say that it's not, play against a flip Tameo, and you will know that having -1, -0 on your creatures just when they attack is plenty annoying enough. Just having them always have that permanent debuff is really tough for them to kind of win in combat when they're having to trade a lot of their resources to get a lot of these big creatures off the battlefield, which potentially sets up future future living ends later, where your opponent's trying to like hit your board. And that's kind of where things get a little weird, and where if you played living end like back in the day, you were hoping to resolve living end once. You were going to have your graveyard full of creatures. Your opponent was maybe going to get back one, maybe two creatures. Ideally, that didn't happen, but you were just basically trying to never to kill their creatures, and you were trying to fill your graveyard and win over the course of like 1 or 2 turns by attacking your opponent for a bunch of damage. In these versions of living end nowadays, you are able to like endurance your opponent's graveyard away. So even if like they sack their board, and then like you endurance to get rid of their board, and then you, of course, with like a living end on the stack, and then living end brings back the endurance, you're able to then get rid of all the other creatures they have, setting you up for another living end if you need to do it. Obviously, it's a little bit worse because then you still also need to kind of fill your graveyard again with creatures, but nonetheless, you still are able to kind of play the second and third living end and it be as effective as the first one, where through history, the history of time, playing living end, you didn't really have that kind of security. You were just hoping to be like a one and done type thing. Still stuck, unfortunately. If you draw these, it's absolutely terrible. It's basically a dead card because you're never going to be able to play it. Press the Enemy is a pretty interesting card here too. Turn target spell or target non-land permanent an opponent controls to his owner's hand. You may cast instant sorcery with mana value lesser from your hand without paying its mana cost. So this is a way that at instant speed you can cast a living end, which is really neat. And Dakota RTFC, and then you would have known that. But, here in like the mana base and stuff, we have some of these other like utility-ish lands, which is really like the Hedge Maze, the Lush Portico, Meticulous Archive as ways to kind of surveil. Mysterized Village, being able to give your next spell uncounterable. So this is actually a way that you could, in theory, I guess for 5 mana, you could cast a like Shardless Agent and then pay a blue and tap Mysterized Village with like the Cascade trigger on the stack, or at least... with the Cascade trigger on the stack, because you have to do it before you actually cast the spell to give your living end uncounterable. So that's pretty neat there. Otawara seems to be the last utility land that we have here. 4 mana, discard it, destroy target, or return target artifact, creature, enchantment, or planeswalker to its owner's hand. We really don't have any legendary creatures, so it's never going to be cheaper. The sideboard, and where things kind of get interesting with this deck, obviously with Cascade, you don't want to play anything that costs less than 2 or less, because Shardless Agent will hit those things. So we have Deafening Silence, which I guess it seems like it's fine, because a lot of the time you're just going to like Shardless into your living end, so that's okay there. Inevitable Trail is pretty sweet, because then you can search target opponent's library for a creature card, put that on the battlefield on your control, and then that player shuffles their library, so you're able to take one of their big monsters and like those Eldrazi matchups. Clarion Conqueror has proven to be a fantastic just sideboard option for a lot of the white-based strategies. Mystical Dispute is going to help you a lot against those pesky blue decks. Teferi Time Raveler is going to be a card that helps you out, not really because of the fact that you're going to be able to play your like sorcery speed, cascaders, and speed, because you have a creature and an enchantment, but at least this way your opponent can't interact with you with counter spells. They have to get clever and do things pretty proactively if they want to try to stop you from being able to living end, plus being able to return artifact or creature to your hand, draw cards, just Teferi Time Raveler ends up doing a whole lot. Force of Vigor is a very powerful, 2 for 2. You destroy up to 2 target artifacts or enchantments against those Urza Saga decks. Foundation Breaker is another one of those destroy target artifact or enchantment cards, but this one evokes for 2 mana, so you're able to like play it, get rid of something, and then have it come back and get rid of something else later. And Commandeer has always been a card that a lot of these Cascade decks have played. We've seen it in Rhinos, and now we're seeing it here, where ironically enough, you can just commandeer, like I believe you can commandeer your opponent's like counter spell, because you gain control of target non-creature spell. This is like a way you can just get a hold of like one of your opponent's like really big dumb spells and end up playing it for yourself and just kind of pulling an Uno reverse card, if you will, on them. Which Commandeer is really sweet for creating a lot of those pretty sweet moments, because I've seen plenty of people back in the day use Commandeer to like take Karn against like the Tron decks, and it's just absolutely massive, because then you just take them off Tron, and even if they find Tron again, like it doesn't matter because like you're just going to end up blowing up their lands into literal Stone Age. But yeah, that's the Living End deck for the Modern format. This deck is, again, making quite a bit of a comeback here as of late, and it's kind of fun to see. Living End has been one of those strategies that I think is very annoying to play against, and for me personally, I definitely don't enjoy the kind of games that come from Living End. I don't particularly enjoy the fact that this deck has a lot of these little contingencies. It's not tier 1 by any stretch of the imagination, but it is just very annoying because there's a lot of the times where you play a game and it's like they cascade for it and you're like counterspell, and then they're able to, or rather like you play like a subtle or endurance to try to like fix their graveyard or whatever, get rid of it, and then they subtlety it and put it back on top, and then they endurance you and get rid of your graveyard, so you get nothing back. Definitely better than it was back in the day, but and just equally as annoying. It's just so not really necessarily difficult to play against, but just a deck that is hard to kind of navigate because there's just times where it just feels like they have everything. You go to disrupt them, they force a negation, you pitching another card. You try to endurance them, they have, of course, subtlety, pitching a blue card, and then they have endurance to get rid of your graveyard. And it just ends up being a giant mess. But yeah, that is the Living End deck for the Modern format, and that's going to do us today in this video. Hope you all enjoyed it. Again, if you did, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell. Check out the description down below for all those fancy things. Check out the podcast, check out the Twitch channel, Discord server, the deck list if you are interested in doing so. And if you are interested in playing this deck list, be sure to check out Manatraders and use my code if you sign up for 5% off your monthly subscription. I want to thank you all for watching the video. I do appreciate it, and check in with us next week, tomorrow, where we're going to be going over one of the probably hottest new decks in the standard format in Is It Cauldron. So definitely go ahead and check that out. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one.